Welcome. Here we are again for Spiritborn Imagining's member highlight show, and where our goal is to uplift, inspire, and transform. I'm Mary Jane McQueen, and in the space with my friend and collaborator Jan Jeremias, we celebrate the amazing members of our community, and through the heartfelt conversations, we get to know the incredible souls behind Spiritborn Imaginings, their journeys, passions, and the wisdom they bring. So let's settle in and join us as we explore the stories that connect and uplift us all. And today we're joined by, make sure we say this right, Austin Cole Jacob. Welcome, Austin.
Thank you. Thank you. Honored to be here. Good to see you both.
You too.
It's so awesome. So, um, maybe you can just share a little bit about what it is that you do and who you serve, and or wherever your conversation wants to lead. If you, we leave it up to you. It's totally open.
Totally open. All right. Right now, there is a set of passions for finding a unique way of incorporating a lot of the things that I am passionate about. And one way I've found to do that, kind of bridge a lot of different things into one deliverable, is through the energy work. That I'm not only continuing my own learning, but then applying through practice with people. And what I've found I like to incorporate into that is not only, if appropriate, coaching aspect, the references, and overall just presence, really assessing, so to speak, how can I best contribute? And if that is something I can offer, how can I best deliver that? If I'm not the one, where do I have connections that are? So it's really about using this energy framework, because I believe everything is energy. So that's why that's number one passion.
Mhm.
And then finding the system that works best for its purpose in that moment. Because sometimes I think that could be coaching. Sometimes someone just needs space held. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And so I love that with the, I guess, sessions that I would do for an energy alignment or just a reading. It can go in so many different ways, but that's what I love about it because the intention is, or common denominator is the energy. So what a great way to then add in what I think might be most appropriate, which usually the person, tells you anyway. I'm really in love with the process in this moment, remembering my why and just allowing the vision to naturally expand, taking action from a place of presence and remembrance of the why in seeking truth, and that clarity then just flowing in as that action is being taken has become such a joy when I spent over a year of taking action from the what and the when and the where. How exhausting. So I
Isn't it?
couldn't be more happier.
It is exhausting too, when you're always fighting. It's almost like for me, it feels like when you're fighting against the why and your mind is just, that I guess as some people call the ego, the whatever you want to think, that the mind is trying to control all of these things. And then when we suddenly realize and lean in a little bit more to trust and leaning into the thing, realizing, oh, I'm not in control at all. It's quite the amazing revelation when you come to that terms. But
To me, also, it kind of brings to mind that whole idea of what we think will work. So it's like what we think will work is most likely not going to work because we're using the thinking mind versus everything else.
the heart.
Yeah, the heart and everything. And I went for a long time. I used to go to this woman who was an acupuncturist, and we would have these long conversations before. She was a traditional acupuncturist. And she used to say, "So what's going on?" And then I would say her, and what she would do, "Jan, that's your head. Like, really, what's going on? Like, go deeper." And I'd be like, "Okay, get rid of the analytical thinking, sort of process solving, problem solving brain. Turn it off for a moment or for more than a moment which is always for me the goal. Um, but and sometimes it's hard to do that. But because basically, depending on your tendency, or for me, I think of graphics as being also very precise and very sort of like, in some ways, like measurements and everything. I think of all those things of balance and symmetry and all those things. Sometimes it's like turning all those off and letting them flow. And for me, that scientific brain gets, you know, there must be a reason why.
Exactly. It's funny that you mentioned that about graphics because I did all right in mathematics through school. It was a little bit harder for me than arts and languages and history to grasp some of the concepts. And so when I realized that when I was, probably a good 5 years into my graphics career in corporate, I suddenly realized, oh, I'm applying geometry.
That's what made me think of it because I was thinking
It's
geometry.
it's funny how those little aha moments sort of pop up and I thought, oh, well, that's interesting. But I'm like, yeah, I'm not gonna think about the math side of stuff, right?
I
Because
love how math is kind of at the root of just everything. Maybe that's my mind, and I'm a little biased. I loved math, always did love math because it was the one way I found I could apply myself further than I had to allow words to explain because it's all numbers. So, I remember there would be times where I'm trying to break down my way of perceiving how I maybe saw something or just understood the arithmetic behind the
hmm
learning because I always learned very differently, but in my own way. And then I would go to try to use words to explain it, and it didn't help.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also with you. I was such a math. I wanted to minor in mathematics, so I loved math. But there also was this whole idea of like, as I was, that applied, like, to me, the sacredness of math because of the sacred geometry and all those different things when you look at patterns and everything. And this past weekend, when I led the meditation, there were a lot of dandelions. And so Mary Jane and I have had conversations on, like on dandelions. And, one is whoever decided dandelions were a weed. I want to know that. That's like, when did they decide? Did they get reclassified? Because they're actually quite phenomenal to look at. And then just in general, nature is very beautiful as far as geometry goes. And
hmm
so I
Yeah,
think that, the whole sacredness, math is a sacred kind of this very sacred discipline, I guess.
I would agree. And that's where I get a lot of my personal appreciation for numbers. Not only because they spoke a language, so to speak, differently than what innate English would allow, but then, like you're talking about sacred geometry specifically, it never ends. It continues. And the way you can start to notice these patterns play out, like the golden ratio is
mm
all throughout all nature. And also tying in back to energy here, just because I'm fascinated with energy. That's what I think God is. God is energy, everything,
Yes.
information, it's all one kind of. But so the numbers, I'm fascinated, like numerology. What a joy to start noticing those patterns. Then you get into geometry and how that plays in form and how expression and then frequency. And it's such a beautiful thing. And in fact, one of the protocols under the structure that I'm performing a lot of this energy work on with, there is a particular one where we focus on the geometry that's going on, sacred geometry that's going on, and then you can apply
Oh, cool.
down frequency along with it. But math is amazing, beautiful. And it reminds me a lot of astrology. I don't know
Hmm.
how, because I think math kind of was birthed out of recognizing patterns and meanings, you know?
hmm
So,
Yes. Yeah, I agree. I love that. I think that's one of the things I find fascinating for me because of coming from being the art nerd, right? So, is it's like the somewhere along the line where science and art separated from each other. There was a disconnect from thing, but that's why I love when I look at the artwork from people that were like Leonardo da Vinci,
yeah.
etc., who
Hmm.
were amazing artists and yet amazing inventors and scientists. So to me, that mash is amazing, and so I love that connection point. I find it that fascinating in that sense of how those forward-thinking people often had the two merged together, which I just find it quite fascinating that way. But yes, it was one of those times where I had one of those moments and thought, oh, and then I thought, but it's okay because, it's applied geometry. So I didn't have to think about the specifics of the numbers. I just knew somehow in my mind's eye that something looked good, and it looked good for what reason?
The mathematics behind it. Yeah. And then that's when you don't have to follow the number trail
Yes,
language because art speaks. It's like that's why people will, well, one of the reasons people will say a picture is worth 1,000 words. And
yes.
especially when these images like Leonardo da Vinci's famous piece of, the man, the
Vitruvian?
man.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of math behind it of why
Yeah.
it's lasted and
Hmm.
continuing to give out reason. That's good buildings, architect. If you pay enough attention, there's sacred geometry all over them.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely.
I
That's
mean,
Absolutely.
why they're so beautiful.
I always looked at, I mean, I've referred to yoga for years as, body geometry, because basically it's making shapes. And all the shapes actually repeat themselves in different planes. I mean, you're doing the same shape you do laying down that you do standing up. And so much of how it works, like the mechanics of being able to get into a pose, is actually pure physics. It's like, if one end goes forward, the opposite end is going to, like, if you go down on one side, you're going to go up on the other. Like if
Yes.
because it's like a seesaw. So it's whole, and teaching people that is amazing. Like if I share that with people, like really it's the same shape. All you're doing is you're doing it lying down versus doing it standing up. There's like a click that happens. It's like a aha moment that says, oh, because then it kind of tones it down and it doesn't seem so unachievable. It's like, oh, okay, the only difference is that I'm standing up now. And now I have to deal with balance or whatever it is, but I can wrap my head around that. So it kind of not it simplifies it, but makes it a little bit more achievable. But it is sacred geometry.
Yes.
I wonder, Jan, just might throw you off guard. So this term
No,
came
no.
across, someone introduced this term to me through a wonderful, deep conversation we were having. And so I might mispronounce it, but it's Eurythmy, eurythmy. And I
Oh.
believe what I understand is that it's producing energy, whether you sound frequency, but in certain intention with the body. So very similar to yoga or a pose or, but also the intention that, so I guess it's something movement of the body and how that induces healing. Have you ever heard of that? I don't know, I want to
The
dive into it
word,
more.
yeah, no, it sounds, I think it vaguely sounds familiar to me, and it makes a lot of sense to me. Because I mean, if you think about like sacred geometry, it also reminds me of chakras. And chakras are very, and since yoga is so connected to chakras and energy centers,
Hmm.
balancing them and opening them up and trying to, promote energy to a specific area of the body, that it makes sense that the movement would actually influence healing. It also reminds me of meridians in the same way.
Yeah,
Yeah. So there must be some sort of connection because most of
actually,
them, because most of those practices weren't separated in medicine in ancient times, like movement, like yoga would have been prescribed for certain ailments, or physical issues. Like they just like you would have gone home with a prescription for doing specific yoga poses,
hmm,
just like you know, using specific remedies for an area of the body. They would have just sent you home with it all because it was a much more, as we all know, holistic approach, an energetic approach.
correct. Yeah, when it came across my wheelhouse, I was like, oh, I could ask a more reliable source, I'll say, than just maybe Google or the next door neighbor.
Well, you know, Jan's going to be looking it up now, so
Now,
just
yeah,
I
I
know
know.
her well.
I'll
It's
probably find a
fascinating.
I'll probably find a study somewhere, like
Yeah.
that's just
I thought it
That's
was fascinating though that, the more you learn that, oh, just what a beautiful thing. Like one of the things I've been also wanting to dive into is their vocal yoga, using the voice, which I know I've put this out to the public before, but I get moved emotionally with a good vocal. Just always have been that way. So sometimes if I'm feeling in the feels,
yes,
I'll pull up, like America's Got Talent, something, or The Voice, and just listen to a good vocal. Um,
yes,
Power of
Mhm.
sound, just amazing. And the fact that people are their structure behind how to do it with your body,
yes,
that's amazing.
It is. It is amazing to watch people be able to move like that, like to move so easily and fluidly is beautiful. There's a beauty to there's a grace and an elegance to it. It's just, but if that's another thing that if you look in like a lot of like native cultures, like movement or dance, for
Mhm.
example, that was involved in sort of treatments of, you
mm,
want to say health and wellness, like that was part of staying healthy. Like they incorporated that as they did things like chanting
yes.
and vocals, like that was none
Sound.
of it was separated out. Um,
Yeah.
until they decided that, I always like, laugh because they decided it like looked uncouth or wasn't civilized, quote unquote. And then all of a sudden they were like, oh, okay, well, we can't, that can't be done in public or whatever. It's like all these ideas that,
Hmm.
they came up with, which what was quote unquote acceptable and what wasn't.
Absolutely. It's true because music for me also I can relate also is like for me if there's a piece of music even if I can't understand the words or if it's just the sound, the emotion from the energy that comes through on those things can move me to tears. And I'm like, well, here I am, like tears streaming down my face, going, what just happened? Like,
Yeah.
but I've also always been that way. And it's only in like for me in the last few years where because of the communities I hang around, I've experienced a lot of different things. And so for me, one of the most interesting experiences was when I attended something the first time and somebody was using sound bowls. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought
Of sound bowls.
the vibration and
Hmm.
just like the feeling in my heart was just like, oh. It was such an interesting energy. And I thought, wow, this is amazing just
Mhm.
just that reconnecting and understanding really right because it's like that when people say that inner knowing it's just hearing certain things and hearing those sounds. I was like, it was like, oh, I feel that. I feel, and there's such an intensity to that. And so I can relate to the thing with music because whether it's voice or just song or sounds, it's just an amazing thing. And that's why for me, the last couple of years, I've been doing a mantra meditation class because I love the idea of being the meditative part of it. And then there's also the community part of being in a mantra class together on it's actually online. And the sound um that you make together and with intention, it's for me, it's just been a really um wonderful experience. So it's all about the energy, right, Austin?
Yes, I can get behind that. All about energy. It really is. And a balanced set of energy. It's
Yes.
polarity. It's however you want to frame that.
Hmm.
I want to go into all the principles, but the middle way.
Yes, the middle way. Sounds familiar.
It does. Does. But interesting, and so then, what reminds me of this whole thing of like sound, but it's also visualization to me.
Mhm.
And I, been thinking about that a lot of the impact of something just by visualizing something. And because we were talking about yoga, and years ago, I read a great book by a guy named Matt Sanford, who wrote a book called Awakening. Um, he was um, he was paralyzed in a car accident when he was in his teens, late teens, I think. And basically, he did yoga in his head. Like he visualized doing the poses. And so this whole idea of the doctors telling him that basically, I think it was when I read the book, they made this quote of like, sometimes you wonder that he should envision that his legs were dead. And he said they weren't dead, they were just sleeping. And that was his image. And just going and, I think that part of his whole recuperating process was doing that. He now has like a whole, like, he's quite well known for teaching people, like teachers, how to teach people with these disabilities
Amazing.
and everything. But amazing story of just him visualizing doing the poses because he can no longer move his legs anymore. And so the power of just that visualization when I think of energy work in the process of healing.
Yeah, I can definitely second that. Neuroplasticity, I think is one way to frame that what's going on. And even if I wanted to take a more metaphysical standpoint, um, into practical, there are plenty of studies already out there. Like take an athlete, for example, they will have them practice the golf swing, shooting the hoop. I think one, oh, I can't remember the people, but it was a famous chess player, and the guy got beaten by somebody who wouldn't have been considered at the level to have even competed with. And the main frame of the story was the gentleman who did end up beating him for I think a month or longer. He had visualization practice going on, and so by the time he got there to play, that's how the tables were turned or something. I want to think of the quote, but the power of, like you say, Jan, visualizing. The body can't, or the mind doesn't know the difference between something that's perceived, with the senses versus actualized, and because it's all subjective.
It's true. It's funny because well, both my yoga instructor, my other yoga instructor, not just Jan, and another practitioner, that does laughter yoga.
Laughter
Um,
yoga.
yeah,
I
laughing.
want to go.
You should. It's awesome because it as she explains, it's interesting because it's like you it feels strange at first because it's like it feels like awkward because it's like you're just laughing sometimes and it doesn't feel natural until it does, of course, because eventually it becomes like anything else, like any other practice, it becomes thing. But as she pointed out, it's like your body doesn't know the difference between when you burst out laughing because somebody said something funny or friends said something jokingly, or the thing because it raises certain things in your body that your body doesn't know the difference, and so there's health benefits whether initially it feels kind of forced to doing it or so it's kind of a really cool perspective. It's
That's making me think of when you accidentally, when I'm sure we've all experienced it, where you just burst out maybe a small laugh, a big laugh, however it is, and you're like, oh, that wasn't funny. Like, maybe that wasn't appropriate, but it almost calms you down, in
yes,
that moment instead of maybe crying. You heard the phrase, I laughed instead of crying, but
yes.
it made me think of the inappropriate moments where I kind of get the dark humor going and I laugh, and I'm like, well, maybe I should have kept that to myself. But
You should see Jan and I on our planning meetings.
They're very funny. Do spend the whole time laughing. And I was actually talking to Bill yesterday. You both know Bill, doing our podcast yesterday. We were talking about laughing. And, and I think one of the best things is when you actually have the ability to laugh at yourself. Like
Hmm.
when you realize how freaking like absurd you're being, and you sit there and you're like, oh my gosh, like really? Like I'm a walking Seinfeld episode, kind of thing. It's just this feeling of where just be, and I just like laugh at myself because I sit there and I'm like, you've got to be kidding. Like this again?
Yeah, tell that I remember we got talking and one time you said you named the inner voice. Really, you again?
Yeah, no, yeah. Her name is Selma.
Selma, which is awesome. But I mean, the phrase, well, because like Jan and I really love, we're word nerds, as we like to say. So it's just so funny. So I mean, there's truth to the saying, it's a really old saying, and people say it without really thinking. It's like laughter is the best medicine.
It really is.
So it's just so why not laugh? There's many opportunities to cry in this lifetime. Um, but let's find like my goal is to find more reasons to laugh and find joy.
Yeah. No, so
Exactly.
I love that. If laughter is the key, then the cure is love,
Absolutely.
yeah.
resulting in life. There's the L's, LLL.
Yes.
Hey, LOL.
And I love that. That's so awesome. It's just
I was,
it's wonderful, isn't it, to have conversations like this.
I was thinking about what you said about laughter and the body knowing the difference. And I
It
think
actually
that's
doesn't know the difference.
it doesn't know the difference. Like
Yes.
that's what I meant. And I think that's so interesting because I think so much of the time, like when we tell ourselves something, like if you say to yourself, oh, don't think like that, or try to talk yourself out of something sometimes, your brain's actually sitting there going like, I don't believe a word you're saying. Like your brain doesn't. So, but if you can do something like that, which is much more which is physical, somatic, the body
Dramatic.
doesn't know the difference. And that's what I mean. Like that's why when you move, and when you were talking about like listening to music and crying, and I think Mary Jane and I have spoken about this before, it's like when you're in yoga practice and all of a sudden you start to cry. You have no idea why you're like tears are coming down your face and you're like, why am I crying? Like I'm not really sad. But there's some sort of release of energy, and you sit there or emotion like energy or emotions that you haven't been able to articulate or you've held on to, and all of a sudden as you move and you sit and it kind of moves its way through and processes, all of a sudden I can't even say how many times I would lay on my mat and there would be tears coming down my face. And when it first started happening, I was like, it would freak me out. I'd be like, what's going on here?
I'm losing it.
I'm losing it. Yeah. But then you watch other people. And as I've taught for all the years, I'll have students who will say to me, like, and they always feel like they have to apologize. And I'm like, you don't need to apologize. Like, it's all, no need to apologize at all. But yeah,
I
it's
love how you
really,
bring up about the somatic release. Uh, One thing that I can relate in that somatic kind of way is breath work, specifically somatic breath work. Um, it's very visceral, to anybody maybe who does not familiar with it. Um, Somatic breath work. So like Jan was talking about this release of energy. The way I see energy is with the grand design of things, the feminine kind of holds that experience with unconditioned love in a way that it will wait, and it does wait in the experience. And when I say experience, I mean the body. It waits for you to acknowledge it. Otherwise, it just, I'm here, but lovingly, I'm gonna wait for you to be ready to acknowledge me, type thing. A great way to let those come out, however they need to come out, is somatic work. Sounds like there's somatic natures in yoga
Mhm.
and the voice yoga, somatic breath work, just
It's all
amazing.
a wonderful tapestry woven together. That's the way I look at it because there are so many elements with the breath and with yoga, with the movement. And it's definitely meditative too. So it's all meditation in motion, as I call it.
I do like though that it's a perfect way for people to own the change or accept
Mhm.
the healing, so to speak. Because one thing I've noticed with the energy work that I do, a lot of times um, I have to be detached from an outcome because ultimately, although I might align energies or help assist move things, it's at the end of the day up to that person to accept that change. Frequency, yes, is the only thing that can penetrate the body without permission. Given the consent, you move the things, then it's up to the person. We could learn so much from cats or gazelles and animals of just shake it off.
Jan's gonna mention Tonka. I know, right?
Conquer.
Yeah. Well, like he always cracks me up because he will like all of a sudden stands up and does a full body shake. And it's kind of like, okay, I'm just recalibrating. I'm just
We
recalibrating
need
right
to, we
now.
need to do that maybe once a day at least, do a recalibration.
Right, right. I, but it is interesting. And I think that to me, because there's always so much focus on expression of what's going on, like explaining it and then the processing it, but also, I mean, not to say that we don't want to communicate what's within us or whatever, but sometimes that communication just isn't like, we don't even know what's going on ourselves to be able to articulate it. And so, and sometimes we don't feel, whatever the situation, you don't feel comfortable articulating it or whatever. And then it just gives you a way to recalibrate without having to explain anything.
Exactly. What a beautiful way of looking at it. This has just been an amazing conversation. You see, we just never know which direction it's going to take. Um, and it's always wonderful to hear insights from others as well. Because that's how we grow. We grow ourselves and understand and learn and take in new things. But I just asked if somebody from our community wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way to do that?
So in the current moment, I'm only utilizing two platforms with intention and attention. So the best way to reach me would either be my Facebook page, Austin Jacob C, or my YouTube at Austin C Jacob. Yeah, I know, but
It's okay. Well, it's okay. We will pop some those things into if you send those to me. We'll pop them into the comments section for uh, when we post this so people can that because I'm sure like me they'll be going, wait, did he say it was this?
yeah, I know. But you have to claim them quick enough because I'm not the only Austin Jacob, but I think I am the only Austin Cold Jacob. But anyway, that's just how the cards dealt. It'll probably get changed anyway as things expand. So
Exactly. Well, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that and for sharing your energy here because it's awesome. I know we've only known each other a relatively short span of time, I guess, in this physical world, but I always figure there's hearts and souls have met in other places. So I definitely feel that with you for sure.
well, it was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So yeah, thank you. We really appreciate it. So everyone, thank you for joining us for this inspiring conversation on the Spirit Born Imaginings Member Highlights Show. We hope you've found wisdom, connection, and a spark of inspiration. If you love this conversation, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you never miss an episode. I know you wouldn't want to do that. And remember, keep shining, keep growing, and keep just spreading your light. Until next time, have a great one.
Thanks, everyone.